Good morning. Good to see everyone here this morning. We got a good group and we're grateful and thankful for that. Looking forward to our class here in just a few minutes as Doug continues to share 1 Samuel with us and this biblical historical history. As far as updates are concerned, our bulletin is pretty much updated. And so really, other than Janie Owen and Mucho, I don't know exactly, but Janie, it used to be Janie Owens. Her mother is, as bulletin indicated, very serious, but we got an email text yesterday that she's on her last few hours. So we need to remember Janie and her family. They wanted to put her mother on a ventilator, and she does not want that, and so they're just making her comfortable. So we need to remember her and to continue to remember others that we have listed there in the bulletin. Ron's doing good. Now he's got to go back to MD Henderson. I don't know whether it's this week or maybe the first part of next week. He indicated that he was going to try to be here today, so we hope to be able to see him at worship. Anyone else that you know of? Yeah, as far as our family is concerned, our son-in-law now has COVID. Daughter has it. She's dealing with it pretty good. Sean, since he had his shot, he's having a mild case, so everything's going well with him. And then Rita's older sister, Maxine, her great-grandson, is 3-year-old and has strep throat and COVID. And they live in El Paso. His dad works there in ER. So we certainly request your prayers. Let's bow as we begin our class. Lord God, we're thankful for the moment. We're thankful that you've given us another opportunity to be able to be together, to be able to listen to you as we open your word. We pray your blessings upon Doug, Father, as he directs our thoughts and shares this message with us. We're just grateful, Father, that you have given us this biblical history and the principles that we can learn from them. We just pray that you'll be with us all and open our hearts and minds that we might be receptive. And Father, those that we have mentioned that are ill, those that are listed, we lift them all up into your care. We know you know their needs better than any, and we know that you know how to take care of those needs. And we thank you so much. Just continue to be with us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, Doug.
We started chapter 13 last week. Remember I mentioned that 13 through 15 is the decline of Saul's reign because he keeps messing up here and there. Although we hadn't got to that part yet, but he keeps messing up. So we're going to run into that here pretty soon. We also read in there last week that that Jonathan took 1,000 men and went and messed around and caught the Philistines by surprise, messed with them a little bit, and causing some issues for them. And I would have thought that with those issues, they might have been able to get some arms and stuff. But as we keep reading it, it's going to say later that Jonathan and Saul were the only ones with swords. So, and sometimes the chronological order isn't maybe necessarily exact in here. It's hard to tell sometimes. But we're going to run into some verses later that say they don't have any armor or anything other than Jonathan and Saul. So I don't think that beating a bunch of guys up at a garrison got them a bunch of weapons to use. Okay, it doesn't seem like it. But that's coming. They're going to whoop up on the Philistines pretty good here in a while. Well, I say they. The Lord's going to whip up on the Philistines pretty good in a while, and the Israelites going to reap the benefits, because the Israelites really aren't involved. They're just kind of watching. So that's coming too. So we'll see that here pretty quickly. Remember that when Jonathan did this, Saul went parading around saying, hey, Jonathan went in and whooped all these Philistines and all of that, and all of a sudden the Philistines took exception to it. So they're fixing to be a very large army sitting there waiting on all the Israelite people, and fixing to be an issue there for them. But not that big a deal. The Lord's on the Israelite side, so it's not going to be that big a problem. And Saul's waiting, and as he's waiting, people are leaving. So it's going to be a problem. Okay, people are kind of worried because there are lots of Philistines arriving. I'm going to pick up on verse 8. That's where we left off. We read through verse 7 last week, and I'm going to pick up on verse 8. So if somebody would read like verse 8 through 15, we'll talk about it.
He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, bring the burnt offering here to me, and the peace offerings, and he offered the burnt offering. And as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him and greet him. And Samuel said, what have you done? And Saul said, when I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me in Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering, and Samuel said to Saul, you have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. And Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal, and the rest of the people went up after Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. And Saul numbered the people who were present with him, about 600 men.
Okay, so they had 3,000. He had 2,000 with him, and Jonathan had 1,000 with him. We read that last week. They're down to 600. Everybody is fleeing. Hey, they're getting out of town because it's rough. It said, when we read last week, they're hiding in the caves, they're hiding in the cisterns, they're hiding in the hills. They're hiding. Okay, all these people are just assembling from the Philistines, and it's looking real bad. And people are scattering. They're kind of like our fair weathered friends. They're good. They're around when we're having a good time, and when things go south, they disappear. Okay, well, we got some of those guys right here. They're disappearing. So, and then they come back again here in a while, but they're disappearing. Yes, sir.
Hey, doing a little bit of background reading, story, things of that period, which we have to take with a grain of salt, because they dig it up and then they make the assumption from it.
Right.
One of the things that they have found in these battles that took place in the Holy Land early on, and I think this situation that they're describing falls under that, is they didn't have an abundance of
and the Philistines were one of the groups that had some. And as we read in a little bit, it'll say that the Israelites did not, because the Philistines really weren't letting them either, because they were making them come down to have their stuff sharpened in that. So yeah, they really don't. And with Saul and Jonathan being the only one, it's kind of weird. Everybody else fighting with sticks. They did have bow and arrow. They did have slings. They had stuff to fight with, but a lot of them had their sticks and stuff like that. So it wasn't always everybody running spears through each other and cutting each other to pieces with a sword and stuff like that. That wasn't necessarily going on.
But a good stick. A good well-made stick.
Yeah. If it doesn't break on something, a good stick might be okay. It's good for keeping a dog away when you're walking in the neighborhood. But Samuel told Saul to wait 7 days, and Saul waited like 6.5 days maybe. He got anxious, didn't he? All the people were leaving. He kind of starts going, well, I gotta do something. Okay. And, I looked up a couple of things. David offered sacrifices, and so did Solomon. David did in 2 Samuel 24:25, and Solomon did in 1 Kings 3:15. They made offerings the same kind that Saul's doing. They weren't rebuked, but the rebuke was Saul was told what to do, and he didn't do it. Solomon and David were being very gracious to the Lord, and Saul was just doing what he thought he ought to do instead of what the Lord said to do. So there's a big difference there. And as we know, the Lord wants obedience over sacrifices, and we've seen that in the Bible many times where he tells them, your sacrifices don't mean anything because they're not being obedient to the Lord. Yes, sir.
But Saul is plagued with the same thing that gets all of us into trouble. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think about on the job, somebody's all eager, beaver, he tackles all of his projects, and he makes the assumption that here's the next step, and I'll go ahead and do it. I wasn't told to do this,
right,
but I know that's the next thing that needs to be done. And then you go ahead and do it, somebody says, well, why did you do that? Yeah. And it's the same thing that Samuel said to him, was, why did you do that? And, well, Saul's got some reason.
Yeah.
To him it seemed right.
Yep.
But that's not what the Lord said, and that's what Samuel was telling him.
Yeah, and that's what gets us sometimes, the same thing. And Saul had 3 excuses, right? All the people are leaving. I mean, he went from 3,000 to 600. All the people are leaving. You weren't here. You said you'd be here. Well, he walked up right after it happened, so he was there. He was there on the 7th day. It happened. And this big old army's coming. I mean, what are we going to do? Yes, sir. You do. Yeah, we don't learn from all the mistakes that were made. We just, as a group of people, continue to mess up.
Like one little thing won't hurt.
Yeah, it can't, right? One little thing can't hurt. We'll just do this one little thing. Then next year we'll do this one little other thing.
Well, and we have that saying, of course, the Lord helps those who help themselves. So these people just, hey, I'm helping the Lord. I'm going along and, I'm not going to sit around, And in fact, that's what you have to do.
You gotta be on the Lord's time. Yes, sir.
I think we're going to see a recurring theme. Saul begins to say, well, it's the people. It's the people.
Yeah.
It's the people.
Yeah, he's blaming it on people, isn't he? Yeah. Then it brings up in there, the Lord's going to replace you with someone else. Okay, ma'am?
After his own heart.
Someone after his own heart. And here's a few things that I ran across that after his own heart meant is David's strict attention to the law and the worship of God, because he did that. David wasn't perfect, but he did that. He admitted to the whole of his conduct that God was the king of Israel and that David was just one of the leaders. David understood that. He was not the king, he was the leader of the people. David fully understood that. Saul kind of got off a little bit. Saul was kind of thinking he was the king after a little while. David knew the Lord was the king. Hey, another thing, He never attempted to alter any of God's laws or change the Israelite constitution. He did exactly what the Lord said. Yes, he messed up, but he did what the Lord said. He did what he was supposed to do. And in all his official public conduct, he acted according to the divine mind and fulfilled the will of his Maker. He was trying to do the Lord's work. He was trying to do it at the way the Lord said it. Did he mess up? Uh-huh. Did the Lord punish him? You betcha. Did the Lord punish the Israelites? Uh-huh. But David was trying to do right. And that's what I meant by after his own heart. He's trying to do right. I don't think Saul is trying to do right. Saul is just doing what he thinks needs to be done. And we can all learn from that. We need to do what the Lord wants. Even if we mess it up, we need to keep trying to do what the Lord wants. And sometimes we fall short of that, and the Lord will forgive us of it, but we need to be right with the Lord, need to be obedient with the Lord.
You know, now in society, a lot of people, they condone men marrying men and women with women. But when it comes to racism, they speak up.
Yeah,
But when they come to that other one,
yeah,
they don't want to speak up.
yeah. Yes, sir.
I think the danger with people like David, since he was so close to God, is that when he did mess up, people tend to take that and justify it. For instance, like when he ate the showbread. In the New Testament, there's a reference to that, don't you know that David even ate the showbread? I mean, he was a great man.
Yeah.
And he justified their actions based on what someone does rather than what God said.
It does. Okay. Any more in that area? We're okay with that? All right. Would somebody finish reading the chapter? It goes from 16 to 23. Somebody finish off that chapter.
And Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal to Beth Benjamin, and Saul numbered the people who were present with him about 600 men. Pardon me, that's what he said. Now Saul and his son Jonathan and the people who were present with him were staying in Gibeah of Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Mishmash. And the raiders came from the camp of the Philistines in three companies. One company turned towards Ophrah, to the land of Sheol, and another company turned towards Beth-horon, and another company turned towards the border which overlooked the valley of Nebiah, towards the wilderness. Now no blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel. For the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make weapons or spears, swords or spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines, each to sharpen his plowshare, his mattock, his axe, and his hoe. And the charge was 2/3 of a shekel for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, and the axes, and 6 the hoes. So it came about on the day of battle that neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan. But they were found with Saul and his son Jonathan. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Mishmash.
Okay, so that's where we knew that coming up, that they didn't get any weapons when Jonathan went with 1,000 men and went to a garrison. There must not have been anything there to get, is all I can think, because if there'd have been something there and they kind of won that little battle, then they would have been able to get some arms from those guys. But there apparently wasn't really anything there. So that's what was going on there. Now, are they prepared for war? We got 2 swords. So I think the Lord is fully going to show them that they have nothing to do with this victory. They've got 2 swords and a whole bunch of men, and that's about it, and a whole bunch of 600, and it looks like there's a very large number of Philistines, okay, a very large number. So it's got to be an issue there, but 600 of them are ready to go. They split up in 3 directions, which was what they did at that time. It was very common if you look back through some history. Ophrah was 6 miles to the north. Beth Horon was 10 miles to the west, and toward the valley of Zimboam, which was eastward, but they didn't say, anything I could find didn't say how far that was. So they spread out a little bit. They were coming in and they were fixing to close in on everybody. And everybody wasn't very many bodies anymore because there wasn't very many of them there. But that's what they were doing. And it really didn't matter anyway because there wasn't any weapons there, so it was going to be a pretty easy fight, they thought. And but that's what I was saying a while ago. They did have bow and arrow and sling, you know, and later on David's going to use his sling, right? He doesn't have anything but a sling. That's what David has, and he's fixing to use that later. And they were outnumbered. Remember back when Deborah was one of the ones in charge and Barak was with her, there wasn't very many. Remember when Gideon was in charge, there wasn't very many with them because it's not the Israelis' fight. It's the Lord's fight. The Lord is going to take care of them. And so there doesn't need to be very many. 600 is a very small number, which means they're not winning the fight. The Lord's winning the fight. And over, you'd have to think, oh man, there's only 600 of us and we won. And there were thousands and thousands of them. And you got to sit there and go, how in the world did 600 beat thousands and thousands and thousands? It wasn't because they were real smart at battle. It wasn't because they had the best weapons. They didn't have any. You know, so, I mean, I know we do the same thing today, but how hard is it to know that the Lord is in charge? I mean, we're the same way today. We do it our own way instead of letting the Lord be in charge sometimes, and we do that. But it's real obvious when you read about it in history. It's real easy to see. You 600 with no weapons aren't going to whoop all these thousands of Philistines. Okay? There's no way. And yet they are, but it's not because of them. Okay? And
What kind of impact does that have on your enemies? You got 10,000 of your guys, 600 of them, and they beat you?
yeah, yeah. And nobody really knows how the war went because it's all hearsay after the war, right? So it's just all spread out. The Philistines got whooped with 600 guys. Yes, sir.
The big picture looks like the Philistines were used to military action,
Mm-hmm.
and the Israelites were the guerrillas. And we know that in history, small bands of guerrillas that use correct tactics can wear down and defeat a much larger group. And for instance, the Philistines probably, when they got whipped that time, they didn't leave anything in their hands. When they left, they took all their weapons with them.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to seem to learn that about Afghanistan, but they knew it. They knew military tactics
Yeah.
and the Israelites didn't have military tactics, guerrilla
Right.
fighting force.
And the last thing you read was the Philistine detachment left their main camp at Michmash and had gone out to defend the pass that led to their camp. And then we kind of know already what happens after that, but that's what it's leading to, is what's fixing to happen, because there's not a lot of guys at the camp anymore. So that's when we know about Jonathan going in, and that's coming up in the next chapter with Jonathan going in. Everybody okay with chapter 13? Good stuff there? Okay. Chapter 14. Okay, we'll read about Jonathan and a few others. And if somebody will read the first two paragraphs, it's 1 through 15, we'll talk about those.
Now it happened one day that Jonathan the son of Saul said to the young man who wore his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison that is on the other side." But he did not tell his father. And Saul was sitting in the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men. Ahijah the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, was wearing an ephod, but the people
I'm not real sure why some of that was in the first chapter of 14, but we'll talk about it. Ahitub was Phinehas's first son. Phinehas, the one that died with the ark, when the ark was captured. And Ahitub means covenant brother, if you're wondering, because some of these names have meanings. Ichabod was the one that was born when the mother died. Y'all remember that? Right as she died, she named her child Ichabod because not the Lord has left us, but the Lord's presence has left us. Something like that was what it said. And Ahijah was Ahitub's son, who is called Ahimelech in chapter 22. It kind of changes. There's a few of those that happen in Samuel where the name kind of changes a little bit, and I'm not sure why, but it does. And Ahijah means he will be called, and Ahijah is Eli's great-grandson. So you kind of see how far down the list we're going here with people. And he was performing the function of the high priest at this point. Okay. Remember also, nobody lives very long, so a lot of these guys all die fairly young because that's what the Lord said. In Eli's family line, there won't be very many that live real long on the men's side. So the others may not even be alive much anymore. It may be down to Eli's great-grandson because the others aren't living. You got a pass to go through, and then two rocky kind of like mountains that come down to that pass. One was Bozis to the north, which means shining, and the other one was Senna to the south, which means thorn bush. I don't know that has any relevance or anything, but it's an area where they can walk down into. It's easy to guard because there's only one entrance down in there. Okay, well, I don't know. It seems like we just read that they were out guarding the entrance to it. Isn't that what we just read? They were out guarding the entrance to it, but Jonathan and his shield bearer just walked right on down in there. So kind of weird. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sure God hid them or whatever. Jonathan was wanting a sign from the Lord, so he said, hey, if they tell us to come on up, kind of like, to me, is like, Lord, if they just tell us to come on up, that means it's okay, right? And if they don't say that, then we don't need to do that, right? It sounds like that to me. I don't know. I don't know if you read it the same way I do, but it kind of seems like, Lord, we're going to go down there and we're going to stir up a few things, and if you say this, then that means we keep going, and if you say this, that means we don't. I don't know, and he's telling the sword bearer to the same thing. So that's what it kind of seems like to me. I'm not sure. But a sword bearer goes, you betcha, whatever you think, let's go. So both of them have some confidence. Jonathan's confident in the Lord. I'm assuming that his arm bearer is also, but maybe his confidence is in Jonathan. I don't know. But it said they slayed 20 of them in half an acre, which an acre is like 70 yards by 70 yards, so 35 yards by 35 yards. They slayed 20 of them.
If the armor bearer didn't have a weapon other than a stick or something,
Yeah.
I think we can all rest assured as to who is in charge. Because even to begin with,
Yeah.
Jonathan said, well, you know, the Lord's nothing. He doesn't need his 600 men.
Yeah.
He doesn't need that at all.
Right.
We'll just traipse on down here and see what we can find.
Yeah, because it said that Jonathan went through and knocked him down, and the sword bearer came through and killed him. So I guess he was whacking with that stick, huh?
Whatever he is.
But we can see the difference between the attitudes between Saul and Jonathan. Saul makes the assumption that he can do something. Oh, you were here.
Yeah.
People run away, so therefore I had to act. Jonathan has been in battle before. He's already seen how the Lord conducts himself when you follow him.
Yeah.
And he's giving that to the Lord before he makes his decision. And I think in that regard, had Saul taken that path rather than the way that he makes the decision, because, then it would have been better for him. And I think that Jonathan shows that, hey, if you wait on the Lord and let him decide and show you, it goes better for you.
Yeah,
And
and-
you don't need 1,000 men or 2,000 men or anything.
No, you just need the Lord.
Well, and I think I don't know at this point whether Jonathan knew David that well or not, but we see the similarity between between these two guys right here.
Yes, sir.
We
Yeah.
already see that. and-
Right.
And thus the reason why that they grew to be so close. But we see the similarities.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we do. And the last little bit that you read, it said that they were in such a panic that Saul's watchmen could see and hear something was going on. Right there on verse 15, it said, "And there was panic in the camp and in the field and among all the people in the garrison, and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked and became a very great panic." Okay. Well, the very next verse is where the watchmen see that. But that's what's going on there. There's issues. And it's not because all the Israelites are down there raiding all of them. It isn't the problem. There ain't nobody down there but Jonathan and his arm bearer. So it isn't like the army of Israel is down there causing issues. There's all of a sudden a great panic. Well, how come? Well, it's not because of the Israelites. The Lord has stirred it up. And it said that there is quaking and all of that. Okay? An earthquake. Stuff like that. So the Lord's disrupting everything, throwing it all into a panic. So the route's fixing to be on, but it had nothing to do with the Israelites and the route. Right? And I guess if they mostly have sticks and that, they're all beating each other to death with sticks. Okay, although some of them probably have weapons and are killing each other with weapons too, as we're going to find out as we read just a little further. But there's going to be a lot of people dying, and they're all Philistines. Okay. And then we'll read one little more section, and then we'll probably run out of time and have to call it a day. But would somebody read 16 to 30, and then we'll finish up with that section, and probably we'll be out of time about that.
Now Saul's watchmen in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away. And they were there, and they went there, and there. Saul said to the people who were with him, "Number now and see who has gone from us." And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. And Saul said to Ahijah, "Bring the ark of God here." For the ark of God was at that time with the sons of Israel. And it happened while Saul talked to the priests that the commotion in the camp of the Philistines continued and increased. So Saul said to the priests, "Withdraw your hand." Then Saul and all the peoples who were with him rallied and came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow. And there was a very great confusion. How far am I reading?
A long ways. Sorry, to 30.
Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them all around in the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines had fled, even they also pursued them closely in the battle. So the Lord delivered Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond Beth Haven. Now the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day, for Saul had put the people under oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food before evening, and until I have avenged myself on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. And all the people of the land entered the forest, and there was honey on the ground. When the people entered the forest, behold, there was a flow of honey, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard when his father put the people under oath. Therefore, he put out the end of his staff that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the people answered and said, your father strictly put the people under oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food today. And the people were weary. Then Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. See now how my eyes have brightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more if only the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For now the slaughter among the Philistines has not been great.
Jonathan understood, didn't he? Understood right away, and he knew that what Saul had said was not a good plan. All of us know that. When you're tired and hungry, what good are you at working? Not very good. Your work production starts dropping pretty bad Well, if you could imagine being in a fight, your production's gonna drop quite a bit, so it's kind of rough. Okay? It did say in there that their swords were against each other, so if they loot the camp, Israel should gather some more weapons, which I don't know that it's necessary because remember, it's not their fight. But anyway, they may be able to acquire more weapons. And it seems like as we fall further and further along in all of this, they do have more weapons as we go on and on and on. Okay, now, something's going on. Saul's not understanding what it is, so he starts, okay, let's check, see who's here. And he finds out his son and his son's sword bearer is not there. So he figures that out. And then he needs to know what to do. So what does he do? Well, he's finally thinking right. He goes and gets the ark of the Lord, bringing it in, and they're going to inquire of the Lord. So he's finally doing something kind of right here. But as the commotion keeps building and building, what does he do? Now, just forget it. Let's go. He just let it be. Let's go. If he'd have just kept waiting and finding out what the Lord wanted done instead of coming up with his own solution, it might have been a great route. But he didn't. He was saying, hey, we need to do that. No, we don't. Let's go. Okay, so he was about to inquire, but then he didn't. So now all of that is off. So everything stopped right there. Let's go to battle. Let's jump in. Let's go in there and do all that we can do here. Notice who all came out of the woodwork and everything?
Yeah, they were hiding.
Yeah.
When they looked, I say, look like we're winning. I think maybe we're
Yeah.
gonna join in the battle or we're gonna get left out.
Yeah, so they all jumped in, and all the ones that were either captured by the Philistines or went into labor for the Philistines, they all jumped in too. So, and you'd think some of the slaves would, because they're probably not enjoying being a slave to the Philistines, so they jumped in. They're gonna get revenge on them. But all the ones that were hiding jumped in there too. All the ones that were with them earlier, they all went into hiding, they all jumped in. So now we got probably, I don't know, well over 1,000 people chasing Philistines all over the place. They still haven't done anything. All the Philistines are the ones killing each other, so they really haven't done much. But they are pursuing them, and they're hungry, and they're tired, and they're pursuing them. So pursuit is not going well. Okay? And Saul wanted them not to worry about anything at all except chasing and killing Philistines. That's all he wanted. Okay, and I don't know why he needed to avenge his enemy. What did his enemy do to him? I mean, I had a hard time figuring out why he needed to avenge his enemy. I wasn't real sure. Has anybody got any insight on that? Because up until now, ever since he's kind of been the leader, there's been no issues with anybody. They've been whooping on them all over the place. So I couldn't really figure out why he needed to avenge his enemies. So I don't know.
Kind of hard to say, because like you pointed out, chronology
Yeah,
is messed up.
yeah,
And I don't know why that is, but it could be something down the line, we could be reading.
yeah. Reading out of order. Yeah, and it could be that. And they may have caused some issues. There's no telling.
He was humiliated. I mean, Samuel came up and dressed him down and said, "You have been a fool,
Right.
and now you're going to suffer." So it's not like he's like a proud king right now. He's been
Yeah.
chastised.
Yeah.
And now, from his perspective, people are running away, hiding in caves, and he doesn't seem to have. He said, "Let's count up. How many we got?"
Yeah.
Not many.
Yeah, yeah, they're not. They have all ran off. And in this area, at this time, there was a bunch of wild honeybees and a bunch of honey in that area. And well, you know, going back to what you said, that's what the historians are saying. Because I don't know that we know that, but to the best of our knowledge, there was a lot. And for them, honey is a luxury. It wasn't something that was real common back then. You had to go out and find it. So it wasn't like today where you just go to H-E-B and buy it on the shelf. You know, not happening, right? You just didn't go down to a local Israeli campsite and purchase up some honey, okay? It wasn't happening. You had to kind of go out and find it. So it was a pretty big luxury. And it was dropping. It was so abundant, it was dropping out of the honeycomb. And that's what Jonathan did. He just went up and stuck his end of his sounded like to me the end of his knife, but I don't know, and dipped out some and ate it. And, you know what sugar does to you, right? If you've forgotten, feed it to your great-grandkids. Tell you what, it'll be a while, okay? After you're worn out, they'll slowly start slowing down, okay, if you forgot about that, but it'll wind you up. And it still does, if you're wondering, okay? If all you guys that have quit eating sugar, it still winds you up pretty good. The energy level's pretty high. And so, you know, you might want to continue to stay away from it. It's not good for you. Your body wasn't made to take sugar in like that. And it gets worse and worse all the time, doesn't it? Mike, I'm sure you ate plenty of sugar yesterday. No, you didn't? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, if they hadn't eaten all day, that is exactly what they needed.
Right, it was. But none of them would touch it because of what Saul said.
Plus, I mean, again, you know, in hindsight, right, in our day, we looked at honey upside down and inside out and found all of the benefits that it has. I mean, it doesn't spoil.
Right.
It never goes bad. You can store it, you know. It continues to keep its caloric value, you know, all through the years. It doesn't deteriorate into nothing.
Right.
So by having it is a good thing.
Yes. Yep.
It just seems like Saul is taking this battle in his pride. He doesn't want his pride, it's all about him now. It's not about God. So you can't eat until I get my win.
Yeah. 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 And we're not going to eat until we get that win, because that's the only thing that's important. Your well-being is not really important. How many of you guys die on the way? Not really important. We just need to win.
I need to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to win, but, you know, I'm going to say we need to win, but I need to win.
That's not
Yeah.
what Saul said. Maybe me. We had people, as soon as Jonathan said this is okay, then they devoured and then went further.
Yeah. And, yeah, and that's what's going on there. If we read the next section, yeah, they're fixing to consume lots of food.
Well, what is it that Jonathan says when he's told about the curse? Because he wasn't aware of it.
Right, he didn't know.
He didn't know about it, but then they told him what it was. And he says in verse 29, my father has troubled the land. He can see right off the bat, this is a bad curse.
Yeah.
This was made from bad motives.
Yep.
That it's not good. And he just had some of this honey and saw what it did to him.
Yeah.
This is what the people need right now.
Right. Need to be perked up a little
In
bit.
verse 31 and 32, we find out what happens if you don't eat.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yep. Yeah, it is. Okay, and we're gonna stop there because it's about 46 after, so we'll call it a day on that stuff. Anybody, any follow-up questions or anything? Okay, so we'll pick up in verse 31 next Sunday if the Lord is willing to allow us to. We'll pick it up.